Welcome back to another video, Advancing with Watercolor. Today I'm going to use color, talk about color as a way of bringing about a center of interest and exaggerating the qualities of that center of interest. In particular, using, again, an image from Paris, Notre Dame in the morning light. I'm sorry, this is afternoon light. And through color, perhaps making the vibrant, warm light on Notre Dame a little stronger, a little more impressive. So that's going to be our focal point in this exercise. And we'll start by doing an underpainting, and in this underpainting we generate that light, warm, kind of honey tone that was on the Notre Dame. This is very typical of the hour they call the golden hour, where the final hour of the day before the sun dips behind the horizon, and because of the low quality of the sun and the strong warm light, it's given that title, golden hour. And I saw this just last summer, and was fascinated by how that warm light dazzled me, just made me feel wonderful in looking at it. And a large part of that reason is the color aspect, not only the color aspect of Notre Dame, but the color that was complementing it. And what I mean by complementing is, if you know the color wheel is a device that gives us color harmonies and complements and other information. But basically what I'm talking about today is complementary hues. And on the color wheel, if you look at opposite ends of the circle, the color wheel, you'll see the complementary hue. So for example, blue and orange are on opposite sides of the color wheel, yellow and violet, red and green. And what that means for us as painters, it's good to know this, because we can amplify one color by placing the complementary hue next to it. And of course we see that in nature, but being able to tweak that or simplify it or make it pronounced, it becomes a tool for us in painting to exaggerate, to imbibe our subject with more brilliance. And that's what I'm doing in this painting. So the underwash has finished, it dried off, and I'm now adding the complementary hues on top of these warm washes. Complementary hue of ultramarine blue, a bit of cobalt blue, a bit of even alizarin crimson, to surround the towers of Notre Dame and make them perhaps a little more striking. As I'm laying in this blue, I'm letting little pieces of that original wash peek through. And in addition to that, because of the nature of watercolor, the transparent aspect, these warm hues are going to come through all the cools that we drop on top of them. In some places more pronounced than in others. And this builds a very strong unity in the painting in terms of color. So an underpainting is a great way to generate luminosity, especially if you follow the underpainting with the complementary hue, which is what I've done here. And as this blue dries off, especially in the lower section, you'll see the warms that were originally placed come out more and create not only transparency, but a feeling of luminosity. So now we get to the difficult stuff, which are the windows and the moldings and the beautiful touches of architecture that are part of Notre Dame. I'm trying to keep it simple as I can. I'm using a very strong, warm color to carry that idea of the golden hour, because even in the shadows we see strong, warm colors. And the trick here is to keep it simple. For me anyway, I want to keep it simple and yet descriptive. We're painting an iconic building, so one of our goals must remain to do honor to that, to get the stature, the beauty that the building presents. And so my strokes, these strokes that are defining windows and moldings, are purposely simple and deliberate and quite strong in terms of pigment. I'm doing this so that the strong shadows that are created by this low light are felt in the face of Notre Dame. And I'm also trying to make it enjoyable to paint. You notice when I make a stroke like that for the window, I'm not painting it edge to edge. I'm letting one stroke carry the whole idea of the window. And for me, this is proven to be a way to preserve the painterly aspect, a way to be creative, a way to express animation within myself, and that translates into the painting, and the viewer feels that. So yes, it is a portrait of Notre Dame, but it's also a painting, and it's a painting we do to satisfy ourselves first. I wanted to express these painterly qualities. So this is the motivation behind the brushwork that you see me doing now on the facade of Notre Dame. And this will continue until I'm relatively happy. I realize that it's an important part, especially these vertical windows, which are very dramatic even from a great distance. I've left little bits of white, possibly being something shiny up there, casting a bit of glare. I'll follow into these browns with either darker reds or sometimes blues. And I try to make each window a little different. I know that the masons made them all the same. The architect makes them have symmetry, but mine are definitely more individual. I feel that this adds to the quality of the painting as well. And the green blobs that you see, these are the trees. These are used to, there's not a lot of attention to them. They're mainly a baffle or a way to kind of push back against Notre Dame and relegate it to the distance. And everything below these trees is in that rich blue shadow. I feel these cool colors, the green and the blue in the lower part and the deep blue cobalt that's in the sky, help to amplify the ochre, the orange that was placed in the initial wash. And so I continue building the trees and the details into the lower section. So this is this idea of complementary hues, I feel, is one of the useful ideas that comes to us from a study of color. Color theory, perhaps. There's a lot of it that is interesting, and but I feel that the most useful parts to me are the way that colors effect themselves through watercolor. In other words, the way this underpainting comes through the blue. To me is very useful, very practical to create luminosity, to create what we call light bounce. In other words, light or color reflecting off of another, or to create depth, richness in color, transparency, using an underwash of a warm tone, following it with a wash of a cool tone. These complements and these contrasts create a lot of visual excitement. And once you see it in the painting, you look at nature and you say, look, it's right there. I perhaps didn't understand it logically, but now I know how that particular optical, not illusion, but optical phenomena is created. And so while I'm painting in this lower section, I'm being very sort of rough and calligraphic and trying to keep the detail to a minimum. I do want to recognize a street corner. I do want to recognize perhaps a few figures. I do want to recognize a car, but to coming out of the shadows. That's how I want it to appear to myself and to the audience. Is it's coming out of the shadows, and therefore not nearly as much contrast or visual strength as the painting above. And so far, coming out to my liking, you see some of the whites that are left. They're a little aggressive, but they're very easy to tone down with a tiny wash at the end of the painting when we do our adjustments. So I'll leave those for the moment, and I'll work on some of the vertical elements of the traffic lights and the clock and the signage that comes up off of the corner. These also are visually enjoyable. They tell us we're in a big city. They complement the cars and they complement the whole scene, so it makes sense to put them in. Plus, they push back against Notre Dame and push it just a little bit into the distance. It's such an aggressive color, and the windows are handled in an aggressive manner, so we need something to kind of push it back a little bit. That's what these, visually, that's what the purpose of these. If you watch how I'm handling the brush, you'll notice that most of the time, except when I come to a very tiny detail, I'm holding the brush by the back. And it may seem a bit odd to you. It felt that way to me when I started using the brush this way, but it's given me a great deal of fluency and has helped the calligraphy, the flow of the big washes certainly, and building up the mid-size shapes. When I come to placing tiny details, yes, I go to the end of the brush, as you see now, and rest my palm on the paper so that I can just make a little movement with the fingers, a flick of the fingers, and get the shape that I want. But most of the time, 90% of the painting, I'm holding the brush by the last inch or by the last inch and a half. And what I realized is that allows me to swing my arm a little more freely, to be more expressive with the brush. It also, after practice, gives you more accuracy. The reason for this is we're using a larger muscle. So we're using, when we're doing the tiny work, we're using the muscles in the fingers. When we're using the brush by the back, we're using the shoulder. And athletes will tell you that if you can use a larger muscle mass to generate, you generate more power, you generate more balance, you generate more accuracy. And so that's what has come to be my working method. And I feel it's really been a big positive for my painting. So this is the finished piece, and the colors are excited by each other. The yellow, the orange that's in Notre Dame, quite vibrant, and I'm sure this is because of the blues and the cool colors that are surrounding it. Also, and look in the street, look in the car, you can see that underpainting coming through, a great example of the transparency of watercolor.